This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Alarms and Discursions by G. K. Chesterton. Section 8, Chapters 22 through 24. The Wings of Stone. The preceding essay is about a half-built house on my private horizon. I wrote it sitting in a garden chair, and as though it was a week ago, I have scarcely moved since then to speak of. I do not see why I should not go on writing about it. Strictly speaking, I have moved. I have even walked across a field of turf all fiery in our early summer sunlight, and studied the early angular red skeleton which has turned golden in the sun. It is odd that the skeleton of a house is cheerful when the skeleton of a man is mournful, since we only see it after the man is destroyed. At least we think the skeleton is mournful. The skeleton himself does not seem to think so. Anyhow, there is something strangely primary and poetic about this sight of the scaffolding and main lines of a human building. It is a pity that there is no scaffolding round a human baby. One seems to see domestic life as the daring and ambitious thing that it is when one looks at those open staircases and empty chambers, those spirals of wind and open halls of sky. Ibsen said that the art of domestic drama was merely to knock one wall out of the four walls of a drawing-room. I find the drawing-room even more impressive when all four walls are knocked out. I have never understood what people mean by domesticity being tame. It seems to me one of the wildest of adventures. But if you wish to see how high and harsh and fantastic an adventure it is, consider only the actual structure of a house itself. A man may march up in a rather bored way to bed, but at least he is mounting to a height from which he could kill himself. Every rich, silent, padded staircase, with banisters of oak, stair rods of brass, and busts and settees on every landing, every such staircase is truly only an awful and naked ladder running up to the infinite, to a deadly height. The millionaire who stumps up inside the house is really doing the same thing as the tiler or roof mender who climbs up outside the house. They are both mounting up into the void. They are both making an escalade of the intense inane. Each is a sort of domestic mountaineer. He is reaching a point from which mere idle falling will kill a man, and life is always worth living while men feel that they may die. I cannot understand people at present making such a fuss about flying ships and aviation, when men ever since Stonehenge and the Pyramids have done something so much more wild than flying. A grasshopper can go astonishingly high up into the air. His biological limitation and weakness is that he cannot stop there. Hosts of unclean birds and crapulous insects can pass through the sky, but they cannot pass any communication between it and the earth. But the army of man has advanced vertically into infinity, and has not been cut off. It can establish outposts in the ether, and yet keep open behind it its erect and insolent road. It would be grand, as in Jules Verne, to fire a cannon ball at the moon, but would it not be grander to build a railway to the moon? Yet every building of brick or wood is a hint of that high railroad. Every chimney points to some star, and every tower is a Tower of Babel. Man rising on these awful and unbroken wings of stone seems to me more majestic and more mystic than man fluttering for an instant on wings of canvas and sticks of steel. How sublime, and indeed almost dizzy, is the thought of these veiled ladders on which we all live, like climbing monkeys. Many a black-coated clerk in a flat may comfort himself for his sombre garb by reflecting that he is like some lonely rook in an immemorial elm. Many a wealthy bachelor on the top floor of a pile of mansions should look forth at morning and try, if possible, to feel like an eagle whose nest just clings to the edge of some awful cliff. How sad that the word "giddy" is used to imply wantonness or levity! It should be a high compliment to a man's exalted spirituality and the imagination to say that he is a little giddy. I strolled slowly back across the stretch of turf by sunset, a field of the cloth of gold. As I drew near my own house its huge size began to horrify me, and when I came to the porch of it I discovered with an incredulity as strong as despair that my house was actually bigger than myself. A minute or two before there might well have seemed to be a monstrous and mythical competition about which of the two should swallow the other. But I was Jonah, my house was the huge and hungry fish, and even as its jaws darkened and closed about me, I had again this dreadful fancy touching the dizzy altitude of all the works of man. I climbed the stairs stubbornly, planting each foot with savage care, as if ascending a glacier. When I got to a landing I was wildly relieved and waved my hat. The very word landing has about it the wild sound of someone washed up by the sea. I climbed each flight like a ladder in a naked sky. The walls all round me failed and faded into infinity. I went up the ladder to my bedroom as Montrose went up the ladder to the gallows. Sic itur ad astro. Do you think this is a little fantastic, even a little fearful and nervous? Believe me, it is only one of the wild and wonderful things that one can learn by stopping at home. Three kinds of men. Roughly speaking, there are three kinds of people in this world. The first kind of people are people. They are the largest and probably the most valuable class. We owe to this class the chairs we sit down on, the clothes we wear, the houses we live in, and indeed, when we come to think of it, we probably belong to this class ourselves. The second class may be called for convenience the poets. They are often a nuisance to their families, but generally speaking a blessing to mankind. The third class is that of the professors or intellectuals, sometimes described as the thoughtful people, and these are a blight and a desolation both to their families and also to mankind. Of course, the classification sometimes overlaps, like all classification. Some good people are almost poets, and some bad poets are almost professors, but the division follows lines of real psychological cleavage. I do not offer it lightly. It has been the fruit of more than 18 minutes of earnest reflection and research. The class called people, to which you and I, with no little pride, attach ourselves, has certain casual yet profound assumptions which are called commonplaces, as that children are charming, or twilight is sad and sentimental, or that one man fighting three is a fine sight. Now these feelings are not crude, they are not even simple. The charm of children is very subtle. It is even complex to the extent of being almost contradictory. It is, at its very plainest, mingled of a regard for hilarity and a regard for helplessness. The sentiment of twilight, in the vulgarest drawing-room song or the coarsest pair of sweethearts, is, so far as it goes, a subtle sentiment. It is strangely balanced between pain and pleasure. It might also be called pleasure tempting pain. The plunge of impatient chivalry by which we all admire a man fighting odds is not at all easy to define separately. It means many things: pity, dramatic surprise, a desire for justice, a delight in experiment and the indeterminate. The ideas of the mob are really very subtle ideas, but the mob does not express them subtly. In fact, it does not express them at all except on those occasions, now only too rare, when it indulges in insurrection and massacre.